I've just got done watching Capricorn 1, so I've got some thoughts on that, which I'll share in this video. But before I get into it, though, I'll just set the stage briefly, talk about what this video is, why I watched this movie, and then I'll get into my thoughts. So, what this video is, I've had a project, I've kept this going since 2007, of reviewing every movie I see. I don't know, just as a means of self expression, of putting my opinions out there. It's something I was doing originally on my blog from 2007, but then once I started this YouTube channel, I kept this project going on my YouTube channel as well. If you've been watching this YouTube channel, you probably haven't seen me do a movie review in quite some time, and that's because I haven't had time to watch movies really since having kids. So we've got one 3-year-old and one 1-year-old, and they keep us pretty busy at home. And I also work. I've got one full-time job and a couple of extra part-time jobs, and I keep busy. Not nearly as much time to watch movies as I once had when I was younger. But this week, my wife and the kids are at my wife's parents' house for the week. We were all up there for the Vietnamese New Year, the Tet holiday. I teach English in Vietnam. And I came back today, actually, because I've got to work on Monday. But they're staying up there for one more week, which means it's 1 week for me without any kids. And I thought to myself, I should really watch a movie. It's been ages since I've watched a movie. Now, the problem was finding a movie because I don't have Netflix. I don't have Disney Plus. Disney Plus isn't even available out here in Vietnam. I don't have a DVD player, and for whatever reason, I don't see DVDs actually even being sold anymore in Vietnam. There are a whole bunch of pirated streaming sites that are quite popular in Vietnam, but I don't really trust those, viruses and stuff like that. So I just Googled what are some movies to watch on YouTube, because you know as well as I do that there are tons of movies on YouTube. Some of them are there legally, they're in the public domain, or the copyright holders have put them on YouTube. A lot of them are not there legally. If and you know this as well as I do, right? If you're trying to find anything specific, like if you're trying to find the new Star Wars movie, then it's just a whole bunch of, if you search YouTube, it's just a whole bunch of fake links, or it'll say like, you know what I mean. It'll say like, watch the movie here, and then you'll click on it, and it won't actually be the movie, or it'll be like a really bad copy or something like that. So if you're looking for something specific, it's going to be a huge headache. Every once in a while you get lucky. But if you just kind of Google, okay, what free movies are there out there on YouTube already, then you can find some stuff. So I did that, and I found a video put out by Looper, which recommends a bunch of movies that can be found for free on YouTube. I'm assuming these movies are there legally. I'm not 100% sure. But one of the movies that they were recommending, and I'll try and remember to link to the video and the article from Looper in the description down below, was Capricorn 1, which seemed to have gotten some good reviews. It's kind of like a political thriller from 1978. So, like old, but not like super old. And I thought, yeah, that might be fun to check out. So I, ordered a pizza, sat down on the couch, fired the movie up on YouTube, and watched it, and found it watchable for the most part. I mean, you know what it's like watching older movies. The pacing is not always as tight or as fast as a movie that comes out nowadays, and This one did suffer a little bit in the middle, or I don't know, maybe in the last third of it. But for the most part, I found it pretty watchable. Now it's a suspense thriller movie, and these movies are usually best enjoyed without any spoilers. So if you haven't seen it yet, and you think you might want to check this out, don't watch my review. I mean, I'm not going to talk. I'm not planning on talking in detail about the plot, but I'll probably say just enough to spoil it. So you search it on YouTube, or I'll leave a link in the description down below of what I found, the YouTube link I watched it off of. Check it out, and then you can come back and listen to my ramblings if you want. But yeah, I'm gonna ramble on and spoil some stuff. So where to begin with this one? The first thing I guess that struck me when I was watching this is I felt like I haven't seen any 1970s movies in forever. Now, as I just got done saying, I haven't seen any movies in forever, since having kids. So maybe I'm not a good barometer of this, but I do feel like, when I was growing up in the 80s or 90s, there were old movies on TV all the time. Old movies from like the 50s, 60s, and 70s. And it was quite common to watch those movies, and I feel like nowadays nobody watches those movies anymore. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. I feel like there's just so much stuff being produced for those streaming services, not to mention all the content on YouTube, a lot of which is, professionally done, those video essayists, that the habit of just turning on cable TV on a Saturday afternoon and watching an old movie like you used to do in the 80s or early 90s, I feel like that's gone now. I don't know. Let me know what your experience with that is. But I certainly felt like I hadn't seen an old movie like this in a long time. And so just all the things that strike you, everything from looking at the older cars to the fashion, the music cues, the pacing of the movie, of course, is much different. The smoking, I guess, was the most noticeable thing about it. The scenes in the NASA control room, everybody was smoking, and the Elliot Gould at one point was talking with a cigarette out of his mouth, and you wouldn't do that nowadays for a couple of reasons. I think number one is smoking is much less prevalent in society generally now than it was in the 1970s, but also because you get much more complaints about portraying smoking in movies if you tried to do that now than back then. So all those little things were interesting. I don't know. I'm not going to talk on that forever because that's kind of the least interesting aspect of the review. People in the movie, talk about some of this. It's got James Brolin plays one of the astronauts, who is the father of Josh Brolin. Josh Brolin is an actor I quite like. I think I've actually talked about him on this channel before in some of my reviews. I think he's one of the greatest underrated actors, a great character actor. This is the first thing I ever remember seeing his father in, but it's interesting how much his father looks like him. O.J. Simpson is in this. This was back when O.J. Simpson had an acting career. Nowadays, of course, O.J. Simpson is notorious for a completely different reason, and all the old movies in which O.J. Simpson is in are now immediately dated now by having O.J. Simpson in them. But again, I'm not going to talk about that because that's something else that's probably a little bit too obvious to harp on. Other than to say, O.J. Simpson's not really in this much. And after I watched the movie off YouTube, I watched a couple different commentary videos on YouTube about this movie, which I'll also try and link in the description down below. I'll try and remember to post all my links down there. One of them said that the reason the director of this movie didn't really think O.J. Simpson could act, but he was forced to have O.J. Simpson in here by the studio because O.J. Simpson was a big celebrity at that time. So O.J. Simpson has he's one of the 3 astronauts, so he's on screen for a lot, but he doesn't really have a lot of lines. And Elliot Gould is in here. I believe it's pronounced Gould. Elliot Gould, Gould. Elliot Gould is somebody I find fascinating because he was like this huge star in the 70s, and then he just kind of disappeared for the 80s and 90s. I mean, according to Wikipedia, he was on TV shows in the 80s and 90s, so he didn't like stop working or anything like that. But just seems to have, all his famous movies were from the 70s, and he's one of those 70s actors that just seems to have disappeared. And then he showed up, he was in those Ocean 11 movies in the early 2000s. But by that time, he's much older, right? So in the 70s, he was kind of like a leading man, and he had kind of this scruffy type, handsome look to him. By the time he was in the Ocean's 11 movies, he's kind of like this fat old man. This movie came out in 1978, so he's back when he was still in his prime, although there were a couple shots of him where it looked like he had kind of a big belly. So maybe he wasn't quite as trim as he had been in the early 70s. Who else is in this movie? Sorry, I've got the Wikipedia page open while I'm talking. Sam Waterston Waterston from the Law and Order. Law and Order is what he's famous for, right? Though this was when he was much younger, so he didn't have the gray hair. He plays one of the astronauts. I think film buffs will recognize some more of the actors in this, like Hale Holbrook, the guy who played Dr. James Kellaway, had that look that he just looks like a really familiar actor, but I couldn't place him on anything I've seen. Watching old movies like this is always interesting to see all the older actors. But I should talk about the movie itself, huh? Here I am 14 minutes into this review, and I haven't even started talking about the actual movie. So it's interesting. It's a political thriller, and like a lot of these older movies, it's a slow burn. So I think you have to be in the right mood to watch it, and I kind of was. I was relaxed on the couch. I was in the mood for something that was going to go a bit of a slower pace. I knew it was an older movie, so I got myself into that mindset before turning it on. The first half of the movie especially has a lot of talking in it. There were some speeches that the characters gave that struck me as being more suited to like a stage play than it would be to a movie. Uh, and I think this is more common in older movies again. Characters were going on exposition for long periods of time, giving exposition dumps that are necessary to catch the audience up on what the plot is and what these characters' relationships are to each other, but wouldn't actually be the way these characters would be talking to each other in a real life situation, but would be completely acceptable in a stage play. And I think older movies were more influenced by the stage theater than movies nowadays. So you go along with this a bit. There is interesting looking back at the beginning of the movie, some characters and themes that get set up at the beginning, which seem to just get dropped later on. So there's this whole political angle about the space program. And there's the senator, what's the senator's? Hollis Peaker, a senator, I guess, from Texas, who plays this like stereotypical good old boy senator with the cigar. And then there's the vice president, and they come to the launch, and it's like they're setting these characters up to be main characters, but then they reappear a couple more times near the beginning of the film, and then just get dropped completely. So that whole aspect of it just ends up getting dropped. And in fact, it's really difficult trying to figure out who the protagonist is at the beginning of this film. The astronauts are set up as people, I guess, with the most interesting plot thread. They're the characters in the dilemma who need to make this decision, but they're really given no personality and very little lines at the beginning of the film. Elliot Gould's character, the reporter, is going to go on to have a prominent role kind of halfway through the film, but he's barely in the first third of it. They're juggling all these other characters, so he's set up briefly at the beginning, but then we kind of forget about him for a while. And that, yeah, I think that's both a positive and a negative to this movie. The I guess the problem with having a bunch of underdeveloped characters, or characters who don't really take on any significance till the second half of the film, is obvious. What was interesting about it, though, is you're watching this film and you're thinking, okay, where are they going with this? And who's expendable and who's not? Because it's not clear who the main character is. And this is even as we're getting into the second half of the movie, when the three astronauts are in the desert going the other way, going their separate ways. And you're thinking, okay, these other two astronauts, are they going to make it, or are they going to get killed off because they're expendable, because they haven't been developed yet at all? I mean, the Brubaker character, I guess, had been developed a little bit by this point, but the other two astronauts, very, very little development. I could easily see them getting killed off. And point maybe I'll come back to. I'm not sure whether they got killed off or not. There are a lot of characters whose fate is ambiguous at the end of this movie. So maybe they did get killed off. It wasn't quite clear what was happening when those helicopters came by to get them. Sorry, I guess as I'm rambling, I'm somewhat assuming familiarity with this movie, because if you're watching this review, I'm assuming you've already seen the movie, because I'm spoiling stuff. And if by chance you can't be bothered to watch the movie and you're just listening to the rambling, then hopefully at least some of this makes sense. Anyways, um, yeah, coming back around to the plot, uh, there are a lot of things about this plot that don't make any sense, and the big thing is the bad guy should have just killed these characters when they had chance, and they had plenty of chances. So like Elliot Gould's character, the scruffy reporter who's digging up the conspiracy, he, he it seems that the shadowy government actors who are behind this conspiracy have a lot of power. So you wonder why he just doesn't get shot in the back of the head fairly early on in the movie. Instead, what they have is all these kind of half-hearted attempts to kill him. Like they cut the brakes to his car, but then once he survives that, they don't really follow it up, or they follow it up much belatedly, or when he's at the western town, they shoot at him, but then when they miss, they just drive off. Or they frame him for cocaine possession, but then they allow him to just post bail and go on his way. It seems okay. If this conspiracy is as big as we're meant to suppose it is, and these people are desperate enough as we're meant to think that they are, then why are they playing around with this? Why don't they just shoot him in the back of the head and go on with it? And this is true maybe for the astronauts as well. I mean, obviously, they need the astronauts alive to film those fake Mars landing footage parts. But then once it's become clear that they're going to have to dispose of the astronauts, why don't they just shoot them? Why do they have them kept locked in that room and create allow conditions where they can escape? The guy at NASA who discovers the problem, all the way down, you can think of numerous instances in this movie where the bad guys just don't seem serious, or seem to be only half-hearted in their attempts to kill the good guys. Now, I'm willing to let a certain amount of this slide, because I just think that suspense movies like this are riddled with these problems. I just think it's a problem with the genre to a certain extent. A classic example of this is a classic of the genre, North by Northwest, that famous Alfred Hitchcock movie with who was the lead in that? Was it, I forget, Cary Grant or Jimmy Stewart, where all the attempts to kill off that character are so convoluted, or like they don't make any sense. That's another example where they could have just shot him in the back of the head, but instead they have this, that famous scene where he's running in the planes, coming down after him in the cornfield, or when they drug him and put him behind the steering wheel. I'm talking about North by Northwest now, different movie. But to make the point that how do I want to phrase this? These kind of half-hearted attempts to kill off the main character, where the villain seems to have the opportunity to kill the main character, but doesn't, or tries to kill him in an overly convoluted way, that just seems to be a problem with the genre to me. And I'm probably letting this movie off too easily, But when I started to notice that these kind of things were a problem in this movie, I just thought, well, that's the way these movies go. Um, and tried not to let it ruin the movie for me. Uh, the uh, the actors are good. Elliot Gould is good and charismatic in this. James Brolin, even though he doesn't get a lot of character development, is good. Um, the dialogue at times can be good. That there's some scenes where the characters have some snappy dialogue going back and forth. The conspiracy doesn't make. There's a whole lot of holes in the conspiracy. I mean, even apart from the problem I just mentioned, which is the classic thing about the not killing not killing the good guy when you have the chance. There's all these other holes in the conspiracy, and that NASA guy who realizes that there's a problem and tries to report him to his superiors. It's one of the sillier things in the movie is that they make the decision to disappear this guy, but then they wait until he's talking to Elliot Gould at a bar and wait until he's kind of already told the crucial information. And then, I mean, it just, the timing of that, it just a whole lot of things that don't make sense if you were to examine this movie too carefully. But I don't know, it was watchable enough while you were watching it. That climactic scene with the chase with the helicopters chasing the crop dusting plane was okay. I think this is one of those things where it was probably a lot more exciting to audiences in 1978 than it is to audiences in 2023. We've just been so spoiled with all these action movies and special effects and high adrenaline chases. That something like this, even though, I don't know, there were a few times when the plane was going on these dives or these loops where I got a little bit into it, but I got a little bit bored during the whole of that chase scene. It's just, I'm like everybody else. I've been spoiled by modern movies, so it makes it hard to enjoy the adrenaline rush of when you're watching the older movie. The older movie doesn't deliver the same adrenaline rush, is what I mean. The ending of this movie I thought was, I don't know, because I was thinking to myself, okay, because this is an older movie, and because the pacing is different than modern movies, it's probably going to have like an overly drawn out ending where all the loose ends get tied up. But if you've seen the movie, you know it's not like that at all. It just ends very abruptly. I mean, it's enough of an ending, I guess. We know that one of the astronauts has been saved and that the conspiracy has unraveled, but we don't get to see the fallout from it. We don't really get to see the reunion with him and his wife and his kids. The ending just doesn't feel very satisfying. And then all those people who got disappeared, including the other two astronauts and the guy who worked for NASA. It's not really clear what happened to them. So, yeah, I was expecting that the movie would kind of clear up whether they'd been executed or whether they were being held in a confinement somewhere or something like that. But instead the movie just ended. But I guess it was an all right ending. The movie tied up the essential plot points it needed to tie up. So, all in all, I found this movie to be watchable. I didn't find it to be believable. The plot didn't make enough sense to me in various places, and I tried to ignore that, but there's just a lot of plot holes. Some of the suspense scenes were decently done to even hold some suspense by today's standards, although it's, you know, I think movies have gotten so much more intense over the years that it's really hard for older movies to compete against today's movies. But yeah, the actors were good. The dialogue at times could be good. It could also be corny at times, but it could be good at times. Um, that's those speeches at the beginning by the Dr. James Calloway character, played by Hal Holbrook. That was some good dialogue. I guess the only thing that was maybe a little bit off with those scenes is it wasn't quite clear who our protagonist was at that point. So there were these astronauts we hadn't really been introduced to, who were listening to his long speeches, and it was the Hal Holbrook character. You could tell early on in the movie he wasn't going to be the protagonist. They were setting him up to be some sort of antagonist, but the astronauts had zero personality at that point. They hadn't been fleshed out at all. So there wasn't, the audience was a little bit anchorless at that point in the movie. And I think that prevented, at least it prevented me from really getting immersed in that dialogue. But there was some good dialogue there when he was going on in his monologues, kind of explaining the whole thing and explaining his worldview. Some of the dialogue between Elliot Gould and his boss or his editor was good. Between Elliot Gould and his woman friend, what was her name? You know, the one who he was hitting on at the beginning, and then later she lent him her car. That was some clever dialogue. Oh, the dialogue between Elliot Gould and the crop duster guy. The movie could have some decent dialogue. So it could be quite charming at points. I don't know. I think I'd have to give this movie maybe a 4 out of 10 or a 5 out of 10. It's very flawed, but it's somewhat charming and it's watchable. Yeah, that's going to be my review.